Okay, so I'm Bob. I'm with Franklin Blanks and Crafts. Anyhow, I thought today, since this was kind of a last quick thing, I was approached on my way out the door at the last meeting, and he said he didn't have anybody, and I said, well, I can do another one if you really want to stand me again. It doesn't matter. But so I thought today, you know, when I told Harry that I would do it, I thought I would do a CA finish. Well, I can do a CA finish in about 15 minutes, so we're going to have a lot of time to kill. So I thought we would do more than that. Let's actually talk about hybrid blanks, turning plastics, polishing plastics, and different finishes. I mean, besides CA too, and why and when you would want to do a CA finish. That's the main thing. Knowing when and why. I guess is a big thing. So I can turn, I did go ahead and get a couple blanks ready, and I figured we would I'll show my process of making a pin with our hybrid blanks while we're talking about all that. And then if we have time, we can even polish a blank out straight, just with nose finish on it, a plastic blank. So basically, I'll start with my process from the start all the way up. I start with a blank longer than I need. Go ahead.
One quick question. You talked about a plastic blank, which is all your resin that you pour.
Right.
And when you talk about your hybrids, but don't you stabilize your hybrids?
I do.
Before you pour them, right?
I do.
So doesn't that turn it, in a sense, into a plastic
Yes.
anyways, right?
Yes.
So.
And no. Yes and no.
So food for thought, let's cover.
Okay, so it does, to answer your question, stabilizing will fill any void that's in the wood. It's going to basically, if it's a small void, it's not going to fill a big surface area.
Right.
But if any fibers, when you see fibers, if you look at them under a microscope, they'll have like layers between them. And those layers, the resin will actually cure between the layers. So can I polish a blank out that's just a stabilized blank? Yes. I can polish it out beautifully. It'll stabilize wonderfully. But how durable will it be? After a little bit of use, it's going to wear.
So it turns dull.
It'll turn dull. It'll turn like into a matte finish on it, right?
Okay.
As opposed to taking one of our blanks and that's all resin and polishing it out, it won't turn dull. The more you handle it, the more it'll polish. The more your oil gets on it, the shinier it'll get. So it's the opposite. And the difference is that there's not the fibers in the wood in between that's remaining, that's pulling that matte finish part of it out of it, I guess you'd say.
Okay.
So that's the biggest difference. But knowing when and which one to do. So I can tell you that if you're doing any kind of a straight plastic blank, if you go up to Woodcraft out front here and you buy an acrylester blank or acrylic acetate, or you get online and you buy from any of these guys that are selling hybrid or selling all resin blanks, you can polish those out. Just straight polish, no CA finish on them needed, period, at all. Skip the CA and polish the blank out just like you would CA, all the way through with your micro mesh. And it will actually come out with an awesome finish on it. So this blanket, this pin, I'll pass it around. That goes for label cast blanks too. So label cast blanks, when they do a label cast, they wrap the tube in the label and then they cast that whole thing in a clear plastic. Okay? So that will polish out just wonderfly. Same with watch part blanks. When you get if you see the watch part blanks, and I'll pass that one around. Pass that way. So this one happens to be abalone and watch parts. That pin that's going around right now is just polished out. There's no CA finish on it. This one is just polished out. There's no CA finish on it. This one is straight Alumilite resin with ribbons on it, with ribbons in it. And the ribbons were made from Alumilite first, so it's a double cast. And again, this one, it's got something on it, but it was straight polished out. And I didn't do a very good job on it because I can see lines from here. But
So don't look close.
yeah, don't look close at that one. Another abalone, this one's straight polished out. So again, it's an abalone blank, so the tube was wrapped in abalone and then it was cast in a clear resin. So anytime you've got an all clear resin on your tube and there's no wood showing on it, you can polish it out straight. That's the point. Anytime you're going to incorporate wood into the blank, now we need to put a finish on it, even if it's stabilized burl. So this is stabilized. It's a piece of stabilized maple, spalted maple. And it was dyed in 2 or 3 different colors. So it was stabilized a couple times. So I could polish this out and it would polish up nicely, but within probably a month of use, it would look dull. It wouldn't look shiny. And again, that's the fibers in the wood. I think they just don't, you get that matte finish. He's got one there. Maybe Larry will pass that around. Yeah. So that one did that have a CA finish or no CA finish?
No CA.
That was just polished. So that's a stabilized blank just polished after some use. So you can see what would happen to that.
You want to show that on the camera? Let's show.
As opposed to this one is a stabilized piece of ambonia burl. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, we can focus.
That's still pretty shiny. Yours is. This is a piece of stabilized ambonia burl that has a CA finish on it. So you can see that it looked more like looking through a piece of glass at the pin. And it would remain that way. CA holds up super durable. It's the most durable finish you can put on a pin, in my opinion, other than straight polishing it out. That's the beauty of straight polishing out resin, is that there is no finish to ever come off. There is no way to chip that finish. You chip the finish, you chip the pin. So it's not something that's there that could possibly chip in the end. Go ahead.
So will you discuss the ribbons and how that is?
Sure. So the ribbons,
Are different or?
yeah, so, okay, the acrylester blanks up here, you see them, they have ribbons in them. They have all kinds of cool wavy lines in them. Everybody that's doing home casting, anybody that's doing home casting of any type cannot get that effect. Not precisely. And the reason we can't get it is because the blanks that are up there are made, they're extruded in a machine. So it's a process that is extruded into the blank, different resins at different times to create those ribbons. The resin that they use to do that is, if you think of plexiglass, like you buy at the store, and they melt that plexiglass down basically, and then they extrude it through these machines
Under really high pressure.
under high pressure and in a controlled environment, because it's nauseous. It's nasty stuff.
Because they dissolve it in acetone, right? Or?
I don't know what they dissolve it in exactly, but I do know from what I understand about it, there's only a couple manufacturers in the world. I think one of them for sure is in China. The other one I don't know, but from what I understand, there's only a couple of them that even make them, that even do it. And it's a cool process, but those blanks are super chippy. Meaning that if you buy one of them blanks and drop it, you probably just broke the blank into lots of pieces. And when you start turning it, you'll notice it's really chippy.
And you guys were doing some of that. How did yours turn out?
No, we were doing PR.
You were using PR, not that. But you were doing the ribbons.
Yeah.
So that pin that's going around, talk about the ribbons in it. For us to do ribbons, other than that process, is what I do is take basically a sheet of glass or a mirror, and then I'll mix up whatever color I want the ribbons to be, and then I pour it on that sheet of glass and let it self-level out, super thin. Under pressure, I put it under pressure, and that pops all the bubbles in it. When it cures, I can pull it off of there, and then I can cut those ribbons into strips with a pair of shears, cut them into strips, and then if I heat it up just a little bit, I can bend it however I want. The problem with it is getting the thickness consistent for one, and getting the thickness thin enough that it, I mean, you can see that's 1/16 of an inch ribbons basically in that, and getting them thinner than that's almost impossible. I've heard of guys doing the same thing with acrylic paint, painting the glass with acrylic paint, and then cutting it, letting it cure completely, because the aluminite resin we cast in is moisture sensitive, extremely. So it can't have any moisture in it, but they let that acrylic completely cure the paint, and then they've used the ribbons in it that way. And I have not tried that yet, but you might be able to get them thinner. The problem becomes bending it into a mold and getting a nice shape out of it to where it looks good. You wind up with a lot of more kind of straight pieces going through the blank as opposed to waves. It's hard to get twisty waves. Those twisty waves, like you see in the blanks up front here, is a different story. The other way that we do it here, that I've done it, there's a couple different things that we're doing now, playing with casting, that I can get similar effects. One of them is the window film that you buy for your car window that's perforated. You can get it at some of the hardware or some of the automotive stores. It's a stick-on window film. That stuff I can crinkle it up and I can put it in the mold, and if I cast it clear, it looks like a matrix. It's really cool looking. But the problem is casting it clear in a pin blank. Then you see the tube. So we do them in bottle stoppers. We don't do them in pin blanks, usually. Then the other thing that I just came up with is that we just started casting with was, you know, if you go to Hawaii, you get the leis. Okay, so Michaels and them have the leis. You can even get them in bracelet size for parties and stuff. And I was casting them, and they give you that effect too. It's really cool looking too, because it's all different colors.
And that's just a plastic.
Yeah, it's actually like a nylon, but the resin penetrates it, so it stiffens it and hardens it, so it's cuttable. But again, it has to be cast clear because you lose it in a solid blank, so it's not really good for pins. But okay, so if that answered that, so I pick a blank. Whatever I wanted to turn for my process, I would cut it longer, would be the next step. So I pick the blank, I find my tube, I mark the blank to cut, and I mark about 1/8 of an inch long. That's my preferred thing. As I cut long, I cut it 1/8 of an inch or so longer than I need. And the reason I do that is because when I drill it, I'm impatient. If anybody that knows me, I'll tell you that right off the bat. I'm always impatient, and I tend to force the bit a little bit too fast than I should, not clean it out enough. And the problem being is when you get to the back of when you're coming out the back side, if you're too fast and that blade's not nice and clean, there's too much pressure and it blows the back of the blank out. If you can see that. And I'll pass it around too. So that allows me to glue the tube in flush with this in or close to it and in just a little bit, and still have room to cut that chip out away so I don't waste my blank.
Hey, Bob,
Yep.
you may not be impatient. Does anybody here sharpen their drill bits?
You-
Kind with the...
You should. I don't, but you should. But I also have a dedicated set of drill bits just for my lathe, for turning for pins. I don't use them on anything else.
Yeah, I have specific pin.
Yep.
But yeah,
So-
if they get dull or if I get too many.
I would sharpen them, yeah, if they got dull. That or replace them, I mean,
Well, you don't know they're dull until they break through.
well, if you're having to force it pretty good, you can feel when they start getting dull too. And I prefer to drill on the lathe. So for anybody that's fairly new to turning pins, are you comfortable with where you're at drilling? Everybody's comfortable with drilling? Yeah, okay,
If
well.
it's not making spirals, you're good still.
Yeah, exactly, we'll keep going then. So the next thing is prepping the blank for gluing in the tube then. So I've got the hole drilled. My hole's all there. The next thing would be, if I'm doing a straight wood blank, I'm good to go here. I can go ahead and tube this now. If I'm doing any kind of a plastic blank, personally, I would not take the chance on ever seeing the tube unless I wanted that color to be an accent, possibly. So I would,
The problem with that is you see the glue
no,
bubbles and stuff.
Not if you paint them.
not if you paint them. I don't. Usually
You gotta paint
usually you
the
don't. Sometimes you do.
You gotta paint the blank, not the tube.
Right.
Correct, you paint the blank. So ideally, this is what I use. And this is what I prefer, because I'm using it on plastic blanks. It's a plastic paint. It's made for plastic. It adheres really well. And once you let it dry, it usually doesn't bleed much with any kind of glue. So a lot of times, the paint you're using, if you don't let it dry well, or depending on the type of paint, when you insert the tube and you're pulling it out and pushing it back in, you'll see the tube turn that color of paint because it's pulling the paint off the inside. And this typically won't do that. Hey Doug. So anyhow, the plastic paint, I usually use 3 colors, and that's just my personal choice. You can use any color you want. 80% of the time I'm using black. I find it works better but at hiding the tube and hiding inconsistencies in our blanks. So the other colors I like are white and silver. I like white if I want to lighten the blank up. If I want to darken the blank up, I use black, which if you think of the blank as being clear, a lot of clear in it, and whatever color, then think of it lightening the light areas of the blank. So that color, and then I also use silver, and silver is usually if I'm trying to really get some metallic out of it, get some pop. The other thing you can do if you're having trouble with that is you can get powder coated tubes. You can buy them at a lot of these pin stores too. They come in white, black, different colors, and that's not a bad way to do it either. So to paint it, I would simply put some neoprene gloves on, or not, nitrile, whatever. Go over my trash can. I'm holding the pin, shake it up good, and I usually do a couple shots in each end. And then I put it down on a paper towel up like this. Don't lay it flat. If you lay it flat, the paint, if it's too thick, will settle at the bottom, and then your tube won't go in. So put it upright, let the excess run out, if there's any excess glue or paint in it. When you're done, look through the blank good and make sure you got all the surfaces coated good. If you didn't, give it another shot. If you give it a couple shots, you might want to check your tube before you glue it, just to make sure the tube will still go in. If the tube won't go in, run some paper through it or re-drill it. You've got too much paint in there and you're going to have to clean it out and do it again.
I usually shoot both ends.
I do too. Yeah, usually both ends.
Q-tip,
What's that?
paint on it.
Yep. So, say that again?
I use a Q-tip.
Q-tip. So,
Q-tip is a little bulbaceous on,
right?
to keep it from going down into the little ears.
And there's a lot of different guys using all different kinds of paint. Testers paints, acrylic paints. It's really whatever you want. I would advise you do paint the hole though, not the tube. If you paint the tube, you have a better chance of seeing the glue line through the clear acrylic or the clear plastic. So that gets us to the next step of then gluing it in. So here becomes my time crunch. How much time do I have? For me, if I'm in a hurry, and I'm gonna turn this pin right away, then it's super glue to the rescue. And I lost the label on my thick CA, but it's that brand of CA that Harry has is what I use. I use the thick though, for gluing in my tubes, and it works great. What I would do in any of the processes, let's talk about the rest of the processes. So I also like Gorilla Glue, this one. It's a gap filling glue. I don't use water with it though. So they say to use water and mist it or whatever to help it cure faster. You don't need to do that. I don't use water. And then the other one is 2-part epoxy, like a 15-minute epoxy that you mix the 2 parts together, or a 5-minute epoxy. If you're just doing 1 tube, 5 minutes fine. I do 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 pins at a time, and I just do each phase all the way through. So I usually use a 15-minute epoxy. So I would scuff up the tube, determine which glue I wanted to do. So if I was in a hurry, I would use CA. If my hole, a lot of times when you're drilling your blank, no matter what you do, you wind up with an egg-shaped hole. And the part of that could be dull bits, part of it could be in too much of a hurry, and the third part of that equation is that wood is very grainy. And there's soft parts and there's hard parts. There's hard streaks in the grain and there's soft pieces. And that if your bit catches a hard spot, it pushes it off to the side and makes it start wandering a little bit. And when it does, it starts ovaling out the hole. And you can have an egg-shaped hole on the ends before long. If I've got any kind of a wobble side to side like that, this is my preferred method, because this is a gap-forming glue. It's a gap-filling adhesive. It'll actually expand and grab the tube and grab the wood, or the acrylic, whatever, plastic, either way. So this would be my preferred for that. If there's no wobble in it, epoxy works fantastic. I like epoxies. So any of them work, it's just a matter of your timing on it. CA I found to have the greatest fail rate with out of the 3. And the reason I say that is especially because if you've got any wobble in it, the CA will not make that expansion, and you wind up with areas that don't have glue. The other thing is, depending on how aggressive of a turner you are, from one day to the next, that even changes, depending on our moods. And I can tell you that, you know, it's pretty easy to get overly aggressive and just pop it out. There's guys online that actually insert the tube with no glue and turn them without glue in them. It can be done, but it's finesse. And they don't even ever glue the tubes in. They use it to hold everything together till the end, and then they put a drop in it to hold it. But it's possible to do. The glue is just there to assist you, basically. So the next thing would be, we've got, I do rough up the tubes. I prefer to. The main reason I do is because they have machine oil on them sometimes, and I want to get that oil off so I can get a better adhesion. That, and it gives it some teeth to bite into, I think. So, so I insert the tube, making sure that if I've got chip out on it, that I'm not into the chip out. The other thing that I do is, if this was a 2-piece pin, I would have took and marked the joint where they went together, and then I would have tried to insert the tubes to where that they were at the same, closest to that end on each one, so that the grain would match up closer in the end when I'm done. Did you follow me on that? Because if I put the ends, if I push the tube this away, then I've got to cut more of this off. The grain doesn't line up as much.
And you should honestly drill from the center out.
Absolutely, you should drill from the center out. And I do that. I automatically put the outside of my blank towards the headstock when I'm drilling. But I drill on the lathe, so. The next thing is to cut the blank to length. Whatever you want to do, or sand it to length, whatever your desired way to do it. There's 20 ways to do that. None of them are wrong, none of them are really right. I honestly use a table saw. Yeah.
To do
I use a
anything?
sled and a table saw, and I can shave a 64th off each one until I get it to the right, and there's no sanding. But it's super dangerous if you're not used to running a table saw like that. So, you know, I don't advise you to do that. I mean, use your sander if you're going to do it with a sander, or whatever you're comfortable with. There's 100 ways to sand it. But
So tell me something.
yep.
How are you guaranteeing that you're at 90 degrees to that tube?
Because every blank that I tube, there's two things about it. Every one is perfectly square to begin with, and it's held with my pin chucks, and it's drilled on my lathe, so everything is perfectly parallel, and there's no glue on the outside of my blank when I put it in my sled. That's how I ensure that it's all square.
With that wander, wait a minute.
Works
Let
every
me go
time.
through real quick, because
I have a fence that goes up against it, can't move.
that's fine. Your sled, I have one on my table saw also. But the problem that I foresee with that is that you aren't holding the shaft and truing it off the shaft. You're accepting.
But the hole is parallel to the wood already.
Not necessarily.
Absolutely it is.
It's-
On
it
the
can't
lathe it
be.
is.
You just said.
Oh, it is.
You just said when you drill.
No, but that's the ends that wobble out. That's not the parallel. That's the ends that wobble.
But if it wobbles, you glue it off to one side. That you're not
No,
holding
that's
that.
the end that wobbles. It still glues it parallel.
It
It's
can't.
not the center.
If
Anyhow,
that glue expand. I'm just.
this is my argument with that, Marty. All the ones, and for years I used the transfer punch set, and I had a sanding pad on my lathe, and I did that. And that works great. But you know what? If your transfer punch is not exactly right, you get that little wobble, and it's worse than my table saw is. Believe it or not, it is. So I found that works best for me. And it's whatever
It's
works
all
best for
personal,
you.
it is.
There's a lot of ways to do this. I don't advise the table saw, I really don't, because it is super dangerous to do. I just am confident with my sled and use that all the time, so I'm confident doing that. Rick Harrell makes the best jig that I've seen for this, period. And it's the off center that goes in your lathe. So it's off center. It basically has your 2MT on one side. Or comes out here. On this side, it holds your transfer punch. Okay? So you use the Hobby Lobby transfer punches, and then you just use basically a glue block with a piece of paper on it here on this side. And the nice thing about this is it's adjustable, so your paper, for one, you're not using that in the center where it's just not spinning at all. And then the second thing with it is that as your paper wears out, you can move it in and out. And it's a really nice setup for that. That would be my preferred way to do it if I was going to do it any other way. For years, I also did the.
Somebody makes a V block. What's that? Who makes that V block?
You can get that anywhere. Turner's Warehouse has it. PSI has it.
The big
V block. Yeah, they use a miter gauge with.
Make your own.
Yeah, you use a miter gauge width on a disc sander. And that works okay too. But if your miter gauge is off just a little bit, you're off again. So it's whatever you're using, you have to get that dialed in so that you're not having problems with that. And I can tell you the other way that I've seen guys online doing it too, if your blank is perfectly square and you drilled it on the lathe and you know your hole is parallel, right? And you've got it held here, you can actually take a parting tool and part the end off. I've seen them do that as well. Just take slices off and part it off until they get to the tube. And you wind up with a perfectly flat cut again. So that's another way to do it. But if your blank isn't square, or it's got a daub of glue on it, and it cocks it just a little bit, it's off again. So there's no perfect way that I know of to do that, really. That's completely perfect every time. Let's see the next thing. We've got our blank trim now. Next thing is glue. So if you noticed when I talked about gluing in the blank, I didn't plug the tube. I didn't use a potato, and I didn't use wax, and I didn't use
Play there.
anything else to plug the tube. And thought I had one here that was worse, but I
Is
guess
there
I
a
don't.
specific reason?
That one you can still see a little bit of glue inside of it. So, do I get glue in the end of the tube? Yes, on occasion I do. Usually it's on one end. When I'm gluing in the tube, I make sure, well, I don't know where the tube went, but if this was the tube, I make sure and I put a bead all the way around this end and make sure it's all the way out to the end. That's going to be my lead end that goes in the hole. Okay? And then I do it just a spiral up the tube. I've seen guys just do a couple strips. That's fine too. Doesn't matter. What matters there is that this end is completely coated, and when you insert it, you start spinning it, and as you get further and further, you're in and out with it. Watch and make sure the tube is getting coated completely. If you have to add more glue, add more glue. But you can't have any dry spots. When you get close to the end, I sharpen just a dowel basically, and I use it to push it in, and then I come in the other end and push it back out. What I wind up with is on one end, I wind up with a little bit of glue in the very end of it usually, which is okay. I just set it to the side, I let the glue dry up. Doesn't matter whether it's epoxy, CA, or the Gorilla Glue. I simply take a razor blade knife then, and I literally come in here and I just chamfer that outside edge and take the burr off from my table saw or my sanding disc. That little burr, you can see the metal coming off of it, get that out of there, and then I run this blade flat and clean any glue out of there. And then I do the other end too. You can look down in the tube and make sure there's no glue inside if you need to. But the next thing then would be to get your bushings out. When you're inserting your bushings, if they don't go in nice and easily like that, there's a burr or there's a piece of glue. That is your key right there to stop what you're doing completely. Don't force it in. Stop what you're doing, go back and find out why. Is there glue in there? Is there a metal burr? Is it oval? Is there what's going on with it? If you don't do that, that's an important step. If I force this in, that doesn't necessarily take care of my problem. It just pushes it in, and you get it in there and you do your turning, and it could possibly be out of round now because you've got something in there interfering with the bushing, for one. And then the second thing with that is now I got it all turned nicely, right? And I take it apart and I start assembling my kit. And when I get to that part that had the burr on it, and I assemble that part of it and I press it together, good chance you're going to hear it crack. Because you've thinned out the material right along that area so thin, and you've still got that burr in there that's catching it, and something's got to give. And so that's your key to find out if you got a burr in there is right now and get it corrected. It should go in there tight, but not have to be forced. So next argument is, do I do turn between center bushings or do I do a pin mandrel? And again, that's something that's personal choice. This is a mandrel saver. It's a double mandrel saver. Not only is it loose here, but it's a mandrel saver on this end as opposed to the nut. So I call it a double mandrel saver because everything here is flexible, and everything all the pressure that I put on here is pinching, not bending the bar. Nothing can bend the bar. So that's important. If you don't have a mandrel saver or you're using this nut and you're putting pressure on here, it can bend the bar. And if you bend the bar, you're going to wind up with an egg-shaped blank. And it's not going to match your kit when you get it all together. So I would advise you to either buy this set or this set, or use both. But I can tell you I use both, and here's why. When I'm doing a single tube kit, I prefer this system. I can turn this quick, I can do my finish on it. I've got a rack over here that I'll set my finish on it, and then I set it in my rack. And I'll do my next one, set it in my rack, and then I get them all together, and then I buff them at one time, and then I assemble them at once. So it's kind of a assembly line, and it's quick. If I'm doing a double tube kit, then I prefer this method, because if I'm doing a single tube at a time, I have to turn it, sand it, finish it. Take it off, put it to the side. Put the next one on, turn it, sand it, finish it. Take it off. Now I've got enough to make one pin. But I had to go through the whole process 2 times, and it took me forever. So I prefer to do it this way, because I can do the whole process at once. Turn it all, sand it all, finish it all. Both barrels, right? So it's faster, and it works just as well, as long as you don't bend the mandrel and you don't over tighten. So I found that it is possible to over tighten these, even with everything I've done here with the mandrel sabers. You can still make it bow the blank. So the way I figured out to get away with that is I tighten the tailstock up just tight enough to do my turning, okay? When I've got it turned all the way to about a 32nd to my kit, where the final shape is just a 32nd big the whole way. I'll actually take and loosen this up, take a crank back, one way or the other. Just loosen it a half a turn with it spinning until it quits spinning, and just barely tighten it up enough, and then I take my final cut with it loose. You want it just tight enough that it's not stopping the barrel. That will true that up all the way around. You have no pressure, no possibility of bowing the mandrel, bowing the blank, and you can get that rounded out and take care of that problem. So that works good for me. Anyhow, so this was the other one. Let's do the hybrid first. So, see, that's got a burr in it. That end's good. By the way, for slimline kits, I take this over to my grinder with my safety glasses on, and I grind this back side off to where the blade's about 1/8 of an inch thick so that I can get it into thin tube. Believe it or not. And it works great. So there's some glue way down there. Kind of an awful noise though. If you use a reamer on this, some guys say they use a reamer. Just be careful, some of the reamers are tapered. So you can actually taper your hole, and you can take too much metal away that your kit doesn't fit right. So, which way here? There we go. So these are turn between center bushings and 60-degree cone centers. It's my preferred method for single tubes again. This is one of our hybrid blanks. It is stabilized. Taking it down in a hurry. Is up to you. You can use a rough and gouge. Again, it's plastic, so we don't want chipping. The highest speed you can turn safely is the best speed with a sharp tool. This works fine. You can use a parting tool. If you're having any problems with chipping out, especially the blanks you get up front, the acrylester and acrylics, turn your lace feet up. If you take smaller bites, you'll get a lot less chipping, and you can remove material in a hurry. So if I'm pressed for time, a lot of times this is what I'm doing. You can use a bowl gouge and just rub the bevel. Carbide person, you can use your carbide tools. Whoops. If you're using carbide, I prefer the slightly radius. If you're proficient with a skew, this is the least aggressive cut you can probably do. And it takes material off in a hurry. I typically turn with a skew. Spindle blanks and pins. I prefer it until I get down close to my final diameter. I'm about a 30-second away. If I was using the other mandrel, this is where I would loosen it up. And all I would do is loosen it up until this quits thinning, and then I would just tighten it to there. And that would be about how tight I would be on my other mandrel, so that I know that I can finish this cut and not be oblong or oval. We have to decide here, or a while ago, whether we want any kind of what our shape is going to be. I think I'll just taper the ends here a little bit and call this one good. I usually have a lot more light. I'm kind of blind, so I'm probably not going to hit these right on the money. Harbor Freight. There you go. I usually take my fingernail, if I can feel it, then I need to go a little further. That one's good. That one's just a hair more. If you look right now and you see a gap, our problem that we were just discussing of it not sanding or cutting properly is an issue at that point. Now it's easy to take it off and use your sandpaper to clean that up and get it squared up though. So take a look before you take it off and look for a little gap there. That's probably close enough. So if I had tool marks at all, any ridges that I can see, not just scratches, but ridges, then I would start lower and grade in paper, so maybe 320, 280, whatever you think you need to get them out without wasting a lot of time. I typically, if I don't have tool marks, I start at 400. And the controversy becomes, when I start sanding, I want to use a lubricant. The question then becomes, do I want to use oil or water? And my answer to that is there wood in it? If there's any kind of wood in it, or anything that I want to enhance the grain in, I prefer to start with oil. So this is a piece of burl, it's maple burl, and if I start sanding with this as my lubricant, it'll keep it cool. Not only will it keep it cool, but it will act as a lubricant, help it glide over the surface, and it will enhance the grain and make the grain pop. So any figure that's in the grain, any eyes or any spalting or anything, it's going to make it pop out right now. Coloring, just use enough oil to enhance it, keep it cool. So I prefer Mahoney's. You can use boiled linseed oil. You can use pretty much any oil you prefer. I prefer Mahoney's, and the main reason I do is because it cures. It's a curing oil. And I can turn the lathe speed up right now and burnish it in, and it'll actually cure the oil. The heat will. But I've used boiled linseed oil. You can do a CA finish right over it. It does the same thing. Just make sure you wipe it down good. So now we've got all the eyes popped out of it. The color in it's popped.
Supposedly the BLO, boiled linseed oil, actually causes CA to cure. It creates.
I've heard that, but I don't know that I buy it.
Well, it's supposedly there's some chemistry involved that creates a polymer chain.
Yeah, I've heard that. I just haven't really, when I started using oil, I used BLO for a long time with CA, and I never had a problem. Some guys say they're using it as their activator on their towel and applying CA to the towel and applying it, and it cures faster. I don't know, it might, but. So that was
a huge chemistry thing about it.
Yep. I have heard that though. So that was 400. I usually do 400 and 600, which I didn't bring 600 apparently. So we'll skip 600 with oil. And then I switch to water. So I've enhanced the grain, right? Well, this is just going to be in the way. Let me just do that. I've enhanced the grain, and now I just need to keep the blank cool and have a lubricant to help for a few things. For one, the lubricant will help the paper glide over the surface. For two, it will help keep the paper clean and keep it from clogging up. If you turn plastics, the paper will clog up in a hurry if you don't have a lubricant on it. And I can show you how fast.
What kind of water do you use?
Yeah. Actually, I usually use a couple drops of Dawn in it too. The Dawn will help it glide over the surface more. It helps pull the slurry away from the wood and the material, and it smells good.
What speed do you turn?
So when I'm standing, I'm below 1,000. Anything below 1,000. Typically, if I'm throwing water off the blank, then I'm probably turning the lathe speed down.
Do you have any preference for cool, warm?
Water? No. I mean,
In the wintertime, warm.
in the wintertime, warm is
Around here
nice,
in the
yeah.
shop, yeah, actually, so.
So this is 400 grit again. I just picked up at the same spot or a higher. I usually just have a towel laying over here somewhere next to my lathe and continue up. That was 400, this is 8. This is the festool paper you can buy up front. I just started trying it out. It's okay, I think. I don't know if I like it yet, still new to it. I can tell you I wouldn't use oil with it because the oil will get in the foam and just make it nasty and it'll be stiff and no good. So
So it's Festool, but who makes it for Festool?
I don't know. I don't know, but it's 50 cents a sheet, and the grid is pretty decent. There's 4x4 sheets, so don't get too excited. He's like, ooh, 50 cents.
It's foam back.
It is foam back. It's kind of nice. So the next thing then I do is the micro mesh if I wasn't doing a CA finish, right? So if this was just a plastic blank, I would hop right into micro mesh and continue on right now. Or I would use Zona paper, which is what I prefer. I talked to you guys about Zona paper last week. Last month, yeah. And I did bring this for you to just pass around if you want to look at it or snap a picture of it. Maybe it'll help you.
For all of you that know Jewel Tool or don't know Jewel Tool, she has 3-inch discs of that available on her website. For
So-
polishing stones and jewelry and clay, polymers and you name it.
Yeah, I'll just set them out there.
So now you've gone to 800
800
with water.
with water.
Now do you dry it?
I
or
dry it.
with heat to try
No.
and?
I just dried it off with a
I mean,
paper towel.
With, you don't leave the waves running to?
No, but you want to make sure there's no water on top at all. So this, it's stabilized wood too. It's not just a regular blank.
Right, with water.
So, yeah, if this was an all piece of wood that wasn't stabilized, I wouldn't have used water on it. I would not have used water. So if you're just turning a piece of wood that you've got at home or a piece of burl that you've got at home that's not stabilized, don't use water. You can use oil for your lubricant though. Use oil for your lubricant through the whole process, but don't use water on it at all, ever, because the water will absorb into it. You'll put your pin together. As soon as it dries out, it's going to crack. So if it's not stabilized, don't use water. I should have went just a little further, but. Okay, so now we're going to do a CA finish on this now, and it's pretty quick. So I can owe the club members here, whoever it was that brought the little foam pad in here 3 or 4 months ago or whatever it was during one of the meetings. Well, I took it home, the little foam pad, and it sat on my shelf. I forgot all about
Oh,
it.
you mean the little,
Yeah, the little foam pads.
the
They were
fish
shaped. Yeah.
Oh, that was, what's his face's daughter.
Yeah, so somebody brought them, and anyhow, I thought nothing about it, and I set it on my shelf. And one day I'm doing a pin, and I happened to look up and see it, and I was like, oh, I haven't tried that yet, so I thought I'd try it. So before, my old process was, it didn't matter what kind of paper towel I had, I would take a paper towel and fold it up into at least 4ths or 6 like this. And then lay speed as low as I could go, pretty much. And I use Mercury Flex, that's my preferred glue for a finish. I don't like it for gluing blanks in or gluing anything else.
You put your accelerator on first?
I do not. So if I was using this pad, usually I would try to get it a little bit wider, about that wide. So before, I would coat the whole piece and rub. Pull away and spray. Scissors. Cut it off. Check it. If it's tacky, wait or spray it again. If it's dry, you can put another coat on. That was great, but did you see how much glue I used? Okay. So when I found these, I did the same thing. I did a whole big old thing of them, right? Whole big old line across it. And I put it on there and I shot it. Bloom. All white.
Do what?
Too much CA.
Yep.
Way too much CA. It puts it on super thick. It doesn't absorb into the towel. It builds it up on here. So I found 1 drop, and that's too much. So 1 drop. Rub it. Spray it. So now CA lasts 10 times as much. 10 times as long. So when you, before your next coat, just wipe it off on a paper towel and you're good to go again. Check it. Good. One drop.
And that's that pad?
This, no, it's this equivalent of it. This is just craft foam from Hobby Lobby. I didn't buy their little applicators.
$3 fish.
Yeah, they're little applicators, but
Mercury CA is a different formulation though than normal CA.
it is. And this is Mercury Flex, so it remains flexible.
And it also cures with pectin.
It does. This is heptane. And it comes in an aerosol too, if you want the aerosol. That's your choice. So I usually do 3 or 4 coats of thin, at least, and then I switch to medium. When you're doing this, 2 swipes and then back off. You don't want it to be grabbing your paper or your applicator and pulling it in. So,
And what brand is that?
Mercury Flex,
Mercury.
Turner's Warehouse, Tennessee Pin Supply. You have to order it online.
You can get it on Amazon, but it's gonna take like 2 weeks to ship it.
Okay, Amazon.
Most hobby stores have it.
Do they? One of the benefits is it supposedly, see I started grabbing it, I'm holding it a little bit too long, is it remains partially flexible.
Have you tried oh, I forget the brand of it, that has they have a flex one? Our club does a bulk buy on it.
Starbond.
I haven't tried that. Some people swear by it, some people claim that it's easy. Over accelerating will cause cracking, crazing in the finished layers.
It can happen on any of them.
Right.
I mean, you've
But
got
too
to-
much, too, of some of them will.
Each layer is not drying before you're
Sure.
finishing over the top of them, and it has to dry.
So when you're all done, I just do a couple of extra sprays just to make sure and try to cure this. You have to use the accelerator to cure it. If you don't, it takes forever to cure. It'll cure, but it takes a long time. So if you're using like on a pleasant, again, I'm in a hurry all the time, so it doesn't really work for me for
So
that.
what if you don't dry spritz in the end?
It's a long time.
So it's not a super glue, it's not a fast drying
It's
super
not
glue at all.
a-
It's because of the formulation.
It's just the formulation, whatever. I think that's part of what makes it stay flexible, but it takes nephthane or whatever they're using to cure it fast, speed it up. On here, and he probably can't focus enough, but you can still see all kinds of little lines in the finish. It's not smooth. If you were to come up here and rub it, you would feel ridges and grooves and everything else.
So you did.
Paper makes that even worse. You get really thick ones.
You did 3 or 4 coats of thin and then
3 or 4 coats of medium, yep. So some of the guys will actually put, so if you're gonna do that, that's okay, if that's what you like, which can be kind of cool. It's like looking into an aquarium or something. It magnifies it some, but it's easy to get to size because you built up so many layers. So if you're gonna do that, I would suggest you take it down below your bushing size. What I'm doing here with this Mercury Flex, I can take it down right to the bushings and then do the CA to the finished size. So,
And you don't switch to like a,
with that too. So now we can start sanding for polishing.
I'll take one of them.
Gotta find the dirty one. I just made a new one.
yeah.
There's all of them. Oh, that's the old one. So the zona paper now, we'll go back to wet. I start with the first one. You can also take, and you start with your 400 grit. So you're not wearing out your zona paper first, your first grit, because sometimes this is the longest right here we're going to spend sanding with any one grit. So this one we have to get the ridges out from our applicator. is we're gonna dry the blank off. And we're gonna look at it nicely, close, very close under a light. And if you see any little shiny dots, any shiny with that paper, because it's a hole and it's shiny inside that hole because you're not sanding it. So you've got to get through to that, and I see none, so we're good to go. So now we can go up to our first zone of paper.
What,
5,
30 microns or something?
going up to 6 now. Okay. Still below 1,000 RPM. Dull side down. And for me, I just found that 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
That's the,
Yeah, and then you start. It's a 20 sanded 20 times, if I'm counting 20. The side that's not touching but half. Follow me? Here I am, sanding. The middle's getting rubbed the whole time. The ends are not getting touched but half the time, right? So I have to stop. Your personal choice, but my personal choice is lay speed up. And I go to the next one. How are we doing on time? And probably polish out one.
there.
You gotta think ahead, man. That's why I tube these on Sierras.
Work smarter, not harder.
My kids are doing mine,
There you go.
Yeah,
all in due time.
I'm sure it would not be popular, but they're out this way right now.
Waiting here.
Yeah. When she's ready.
Wait till she starts to walk.
Yeah, she's only 6 weeks old, so that's why this is fun.
So
I got that one.
I'll probably do something that none of you probably do. So I use my lathe for a lot of things. I drill a lot of stuff, although I do have a drill press, a
Let's
small
not
one.
get
but-
personal though.
Yeah, I know. And I'll show you that. We got a lathe. We can turn things around. It's easy to make a press. An awesome little press too. The bad part about it is if you have to disassemble, knock on wood. I've only had to take out, it's partially wood.
Behind you.
I've only had to take apart half a dozen.
So you're not cleaning off between each one?
No, so the question is, am I cleaning off between each one? And the reason is, what grid is that paper towel?
Right, exactly. Now, you're also not stopping and going horizontal.
No. If this was a bigger turning than of the bed between each grid, you can really tell the difference. If you don't, you'll wind up with radial scratches in it that you didn't get out because you got in a hurry talking like I do.
Do you do it every grid or do you do opposite?
I do it every grid I stop. But that's how I know with my bigger blanks that I've sanded long enough.
Because you get rid of the radial.
I'm getting rid of the horizontal. When I take them out, the horizontal one's out with the next grit, and they're all radial again, I know I've sanded long enough with that grit, I can back in with it, horizontal, and then I can do it again. And that's how you know. And it really matters, the bigger the blank you get, especially with this, the longer you have to spin sanding, and the easier it is to skip too fast a grit and wind up with scratches that you'll see forever unless you reverse yourself back up through the grits to get rid of them. So
And your zone of paper lasts quite a while?
so if I was just doing pins with this, I would do about 6 pins with this piece. Here's what else I found at home. I get used to this. So I write on one end, okay? And I know when I start with that new paper that I start with the end that's got the writing on it, and I'm using the very end of it. And I mentally count to myself, okay, 1 pin, that's on the end of that paper, right? And then the second one I do will be about a 1/4 inch lower when I'm sanding with it. I'll move it down to there. And then the third one I'm using in the middle, and the fourth one I'm down here. And that way I know I'm using a fresh piece of sandpaper all the way through, and I've got a good piece to go. That helps me, I found that out. That's how I do it, just to make sure.
But you get about.
To begin with, I didn't do that. I just used the paper and I got about 6 pins out of it and I moved on. I think it worked okay, but when I got into the bigger blanks, sometimes I could see scratches, so, you know, I wonder on how fresh, you know, if you catch a little rock or something in it, or if you're doing rings or you're running it on the mandrel or running it on the bushings, I mean, that's sanding that out faster on that particular part of the paper. So, I'm here talking and not counting, and I probably got this all messed up, but you get the gist of it.
It should be your last, right?
Yeah, this is it. So your point about not wiping the blank off, if you notice, I do try to dip quite often, and that's to get that slurry off the paper from the previous one. Because if I get a little metal burr or something in there, I want to wipe it off good. If I had to stop and wipe it off for any reason, I would just use my forearm to wipe it down. I don't want to use any kind of paper on it.
What about chamois?
What grit is it?
Soft.
I don't know. If I had to use something, honestly, your glasses, your lens cleaners, that's probably what I would use, but you're going to ruin it right away. So, our bigger blanks, when I get done polishing on the Beal system, sometimes I use a little bit of, if they've got burl in them, I'll use a little carnuba wax to polish the burl, to really bring out the high luster, because I don't put any CA or anything on them. I just polish them out. So my final step is the Beal system, just the cotton wheel with a little bit of carnuba wax. So when I'm all done polishing it, then I take it upstairs and use glass wipes and wipe it all down and polish it by hand. And it just to wipe any debris off of it. So, well, we can find out what we got right now, whether I did okay or not.
Now you better give it to me.
Shoot the light out of it,
What's that?
and shoot his light out.
Yeah. Get the light out. So not bad. So this at this point would come off my lathe and go to be polished. So I put it over here in my holder till I get a bunch of them, and I put my Beal system on here and I polish. Since I'm not at home to polish it, this is McGuire's plastic polish. When I used to use micro mesh, I would go straight from micro mesh to this, and then I would use this and polish it out on my Beal. When I got the Zona paper, I found out that I could completely skip this step here and go straight to my Beal system. And I reason that as being this. Micro mesh goes to 12,000. Micro mesh goes to 12,000 grit. Your Zona paper goes to 14,000 grit. I think that couple thousand grit difference is a matter of this difference right here. So this is what I used to do all the time.
What grit's your finger?
Exactly.
His finger about 800.
Exactly, it probably is. But I find this still to be the best applicator over anything else.
So but you could use the glasses cleaner, right? If
You could, yeah. So when I get it built up, I just wipe it off.
only reason I asked is that I get those things for free all the time.
Yep, you could probably use them, they'd probably work fantastic. So with this, I do want to cure it or use a little heat, generate a little heat, and the heat I'm generating will actually help polish it. Normally I would just spend a little bit more time on it, rubbing it out. You'll notice that it goes from a liquid to a kind of a solid, almost like a waxy surface on it. And when it does that, then you can start increasing the speed. Good thing this isn't acrylester. So the question was, do we use the HTPE bushings for CA earlier? And no, I do not. Because why? There's no need to in my book. So then I get my 400 grit or my 600 grit with a drop of oil on it. Lay it on a flat place. I can do it here. Flat place with no sawdust under it. And I just get clean that burr up on the end if there's any CA. And at the same time, I turn it to about a 45 and just 3 or 4 little turns. So this rounds that corner over so you don't have a sharp corner. And if I'm off on my bushing size, it'll help hide that imperfection. You won't notice it near as much because it's a round corner where it meets the hardware and it's harder to see if it's on or off. Okay. And then we come over here to our press. Turned on with your chuck. Boy, this one doesn't like me. And knockout bar. The other type of turn between center mandrels. These are the kind that you can use your regular bushings for. I bought them and I personally don't like them because the set I got, the one that's rotating over here, that's your live center, that's the same shape as this though, it's got a bearing in it and the bearing is a little bit loose, so it throws it off just a hair on mine. And it may just be mine, I should have probably just sent it back. But there's a kit. Okay, I haven't done this kit, but I'm assuming it's the same as the Sierras and Series, all them. By the way, it was turned on Sierra bushing, so. Okay, let's see here. We got this one come apart? No.
Well, those don't come apart.
Okay. And it's loose. So they're not exact. Or this threads. And the finial holds it together? Yeah. Okay, so that's what it is. Okay, so it's loose is okay. We'll go ahead and assemble it. And you have to decide which end you want to be which. So I always put the hardware towards my piece of burl or piece of wood. This is just a soft piece, so it actually has a little give to it. And if we want to line our clip, we can. I guess it doesn't matter on this one. One down. Let's see
So
here.
put your pin kit in, no.
No.
No, put your spring on, put your pin kit in the tip, screw the tip onto, no?
Nope, right.
In the
No.
kit.
Backwards.
There you go. Now, screw it on, no, screw it on to the kit. There you go.
Okay. I got you.
And you're done.
Okay.
You just put it together.
And that just holds it together that way. Perfect. And good. All right, so there's one done.
Well done.
Could have probably done, thank you. We could have probably done a few more coats. It looks like I got a little bit thin on the CA on that end, but
Cover it up. Move the clip to it.
we'll pass that around. All right. Yeah, let's do it.
Hey,
That's already gone, huh? Okay,
I called it
so
earlier. Wait a second.
typically at home, I do 5 medium and 5 thins. So we did 3 and 3, and we might have burned through the finish just a little bit on the end there, on the wood. It's not quite as shiny
You
as
talk too much with the town.
shiny as I wanted to be. So how much time do we have?
45 minutes.
Okay, so if I can find that one.
There you go. She calls the next one.
Somebody call the next one.
She already did.
Is there a blank like this one going around that's got a tube in it?
you should have
Where's
done
the-
that.
Blank went back up on the table. The one that sent out. But it's the one that cracked out the end, or chipped off the end.
That's what he wants.
The blue, it's the other end of this one, but it's already.
No, that didn't come around.
Yeah.
Okay.
You sent around a hybrid, I think.
That's it right there, I'm blind. See, that's how us woodturners are. We can't find what's right in front of our face. At least that's how I am. All right, again, same thing, make sure the bushings fit, and they do. And get rid of our press. Nice center back.
So I have to take a phone call. Did we decide what we're doing next month?
What are you doing?
What are you doing?
He volunteered.
We all spoke up. We don't know what we're doing, I don't think. We haven't got a volunteer yet.
What does people want to see, I guess?
That's what I asked and nobody answered.
Well, I'm talking again.
What are common problems and how do you cure them?
It's a good one. Common problems with turning or with wood or?
What are things that go wrong that, and how do you cure them?
Well, with one of our blanks, I'll tell you what, one thing that can go wrong. So my lay speed really low. So that's chipping. And if you look at it, I just took some nasty chips out of it. So low speed, this is a sharp tool, it's just low speed did that. So the difference is high speed. You can still hear it, it's a little bit chippy.
Did you talk about hazing, too much accelerator,
Say what?
too much accelerator, getting hazing?
Too much.
You get the white hazing on it, right, when you're using CA.
Yep. So yeah, the bloom. Okay, so he was asking about the bloom and CA. So when you're doing your CA finish and you're spraying your applicator, if you see like a white kind of mushroom thing growing on it, it'll just start taking off. It's like a white algae spreading on the blank. It's called a bloom, and that's from too much accelerator. It's curing too fast, or the CA is too thick. What I found to cure that is to, one, don't put your CA on so thick, and two, don't spray so close or don't spray so much. That's one of the reasons I quit using a spray can, because I was using that P2, 42 or whatever it is.
210, I think.
210 super glue. And it was easy to spray too much too quick and get a bloom going. And if you get that bloom going and you put another coat of CA over the bloom, you're going to see it forever. You can't get it off without taking it all the way back down and sanding it off. So if you see that bloom happen when you're putting a coat on, stop and sand that bloom off, and then you can continue. The worst part about that is that at the same time, if you're getting that kind of thing happening, the other end of that is that your pins 2 weeks later can all of a sudden you'll go look at one and they might have some hairline crazing, and that's the same thing. It's too thick and too much accelerator.
It's not drying between coats.
Yep, it's not drying between your coats and you're building it too thick, and as it finally does cure, it crazes. So if you're getting that, again, that's too much applicator, or too much accelerator, or too much super glue that you're applying at one time.
For those of you who don't know what the crazing is, it's like bird feed or chicken. Cracking with your foot. What? No, that is not
For those of you that are fairly new to turning plastics, unless you're proficient with a skew like that, carbide tools can be your friend. They're probably the easiest tool you can use on them as far as being the most friendly. I mentioned earlier a little bit that this one's a slight radius. It's not quite square. 2 minutes?
2-inch radius.
2-inch radius. So yeah, it's slight. I like that because the square ones, when you're going in, if you catch that edge, you can really do nasty things to the blank, where this one's pretty friendly. The round ones take material off in more of a hurry. I don't like them because you get too much in and out. It's too hard to control your consistency on your blank. This is basically I guess you'd say my finishing tool, my last tool I use on my blank. I typically rough out and turn it almost all the way down with this, and then I will do my final shape with this tool. Just because I have so much control over being able to keep it parallel or doing a slight barrel shape or whatever I want with this tool, compared to this tool I can get a little bit of in and outs on sometimes. Or if I use it as a scraper, I can use it as a scraper.
You can also do the carbide.
But it can be fairly aggressive. You can hear that noise. That's vibration. The vibration can be kind of a bad thing. It's because it's cutting too much at one time because there's a flat edge on it. If you were using one of the round skews, you might have a better chance. But this tool is your friend if you've turned a lot of plastics. There we go. That helps. Good there. A little more there. if I was, I'm turning at full speed right now. This is a pin blank. If I was doing a bottle stopper blank, I would not be at full speed. One of our hybrids. I would be at whatever is a safer speed, as fast as I felt safe at. And as I get bigger and bigger, the lower the speed gets. Our big 6-inch blanks, that big sphere I did, most of that I think I was less than 1,000 RPM on. I was like 800. It's a lot harder to get rid of your chippiness that we talked about on a big blank like that, because you can't get your lathe speed up to the right spot. The thing that comes into play there, because you can't get your lathe speed up, what everybody tells you about turning, rub the bevel, learn how to sharpen tools, and get a slicing cut. You've got to learn to get a slicing cut. So find that bevel, don't quite rub it, but be right at it, and get a slicing cut out of it. That's your most friendliest thing you can do, other than, and these work great on them too. So to rough out that big blank, I'm probably using something like this though. A turning, you can rough it out with one of these, but if you're getting a lot of chipping, you're going to need to turn to something like this to take fast material off to get there. To throw that out there. Anyhow, I think we're maybe just a hair big, but we'll call it good. So, tool marks. There's no ridges. I see a couple lines, but we can start at 400 again. Lay speed down. I'm at 600 right now. So notice I didn't use oil. There's no wood in it. There's no benefit to using oil. I'm just wasting the oil now. So I do need a lubricant. And the reason I say I need a lubricant is this. So here's dry paper on a dry blank. Almost a dry paper. If it was dry, it would be completely clogged up. Can you zoom in on that? You can see how those two spots, it gummed it up that fast. That is super smooth right there. I mean, that's like polishing, like 10,000 grit. So, and you can see the blank. The blank, it doesn't matter on, it's just dull, but it clogged up that paper super fast. And the other thing with it is it's generating a lot more heat. You're not gliding over the surface. And you'll find that with plastics, heat is your enemy. If you're generating too much heat when you're sanding, it softens the material, the plastic, just a little bit, and it softens it enough that the paper wants to grip deeper. So any little grip that you have on the paper tends to want to make bigger ruts. Think of them as ruts in mud. It tends to want to just sink down in there more. And each one of them you put in, you've got to take out later with your polishing paper. So you don't want to put them in there. Any questions? And you get bored now. Okay. Thanks.
Sanding is so exciting.
I know.
So tell us the story about your bandsaw.
What about the pull block? Well, it's a typical thing. So, I have a small shop. I don't have a lot of money usually for nice tools and stuff, so I tend to make use of a lot of the things that I have at home. And I'm missing my... so I have an old jet bandsaw. The cabinet saw, it's just a 14-inch. I bet it's cut $80,000 worth of burl. And the thing is just a trooper, I love it, but I think that's two. And that's two. 32. So I've never had a good fence for it. Didn't come with a fence, never had a good fence. Hobby Lobby, Harbor Freight has the bar magnets that you can hang your kitchen knives on. They make awesome fences. That's what I've used for my fence. You just pick it up, it's a magnet, it sticks to your table, pick it up, move it over. And I have the stick-on tape that you buy for tools on the front and the back. I've used that for 10 years probably. It's like, you know what, I finally got to do something about this. This is just ridiculous. I cut so much burl on it. I'm literally on it 2 or 3 times a week cutting burl. So I finally ordered the Craig fence for it because it didn't come with one. So here I am installing it, putting a new blade in it and everything. And I just got through cutting a bunch of blanks, didn't clean the floor up, and popping the new blade in, and guess what? Where's the cool block go? I searched for 30 minutes probably and finally gave up. It's like, just go buy a new one. So that's the story with the bandsaw. Just like your springs and everything else. So when I'm turning this stuff, I have a trash can, a 55-gallon trash can under my lathe. It goes right in the trash can. But I've learned, because my press is my lathe, that when I'm putting kits together, the trash can comes out.
Oh, I want to see that. Holy crap.
I got pretty good at it. I've also got a dust collector hose hooked up to it. Not a dust collector, but a shop system. And I got good enough that I can direct the ribbons off the blanks into that as well. Usually. So it's kind of fun.
You just turn up the volume on the suction on that, and it just sucks it into it.
Yep. That, and you got to be good enough to get it started. Otherwise it winds up all over. It's mesmerizing watching it just pull it off the lathe though. Too much fun. So shop is 14 by 18 with a little side room that's about 4 by 6 that houses the dust collector. So everything is on mobile carts. I have a 2-car garage next to it. So everything I can pull out and pull into the garage if I've got to get the access to stuff. So it makes it very tight. And the back L-shaped part of it has an L-shaped bench that's built in. So that's where all the casting happens and yeah, well, building of everything else. So kind of fun. So to top it all off, here I am with a 20-year-old bandsaw, and I've been a woodworker all my life, and up till I started turning about 12 years ago or so, it was all flat work stuff, just hobby making things. And then as soon as I got an old 1950s lathe at a yard sale, since then everything has been focused around a wood lathe. So finally 2 years ago have traded up to a Laguna lathe that I turn on now.
You like that one?
I love it. And the funny thing is I get notifications from Craigslist whenever there's anything wood turning related happens on their for sale page. And 2 weeks ago there was a yard sale with wood turning tools, and I went to the yard sale and bought a Jet 10 16 or whatever it is with a stand, 6-speed.
Oh, it was variable.
Not variable. 6-speed with the stand for $120. Turned around and bought Henry Taylor, a Henry Taylor bottom gouge. Asked him what he wanted for it. He says $10. Brand new. He had a Robert Sorby, the 1 inch or 1 1/4 inch scraper. How much you want for it? $10. He had a, Robert Sorby, what is it? The square one. It's square. What's it? Badan. A Badan. $10. A Nova Chuck, this one, without these jaws on it. But with a set of the deep jaws. $10. It's like, wow.
You robbed him.
And I got there late, and the guy that got there before me got all his pin stuff. Yeah. Oh, that's the guy that got there before me. Hey! So how'd that Beal system work out for you?
Really nice.
Yeah, he got a brand new Beal system. I was like, how much do you want for that? I've got one. He says, $20. I think that's what he said, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I told him, I said, you want that. That's awesome. Yeah, it was kind of fun, but you don't run across those deals all the time. So now I have a dedicated, probably going to turn it into just a dedicated polishing lathe. It'll just put my Beal on it.
So when you say polish, you do triple E, diamond, and carnuba? Or?
Depends. So if I'm doing like a bowl that's just all wood, it would depend. So the triple E and the white diamond, basically think of them as a grit of sandpaper. So if you've done a really good job of sanding all the way through, you can go right to the carnuba wax. There's no need for the other two. So I usually start with the carnuba wax wheel. If I see scratches, then I back up to the white diamond. If I can't get them out with the white diamond, then I back up to the brown rouge. If I can't get them out with the brown rouge, then I've got to put it back on the lathe, or I got to hand sand them out. But if you go up to whatever you go up to, remember you got to work yourself back down. So if you go to the brown, then you got to go to the white, and then you got to go to the carnuba and work it back down. I really like the Beal system. It takes a little bit of getting used to. It's not really good for bowls, the one I have, because it's a 3-wheel. They have a bowl buff that would be better for bowls.
Is it the, like, 6 or 8 inch?
It's an 8-inch, so it's the big one. A lot of the guys on the pin turning communities use the 4-inch ones, the PSI cells, and they have a Blue Rouge with them. Blue Rouge and just a cotton pad. So there's a little burr right there. But the Blue Rouge, I think is more suitable for pins, probably. But then again, when I'm getting to this stage where I'm at with polishing, I usually never use any rouge at all. I'm just a white cotton wheel, and maybe with a little bit of carnuba on it.
Sorry about that.
So here's a question for you. So now we've talked about different finishes for different applications, right? So if we're doing a hybrid, we probably want to do CA because it's got wood in it. If we're doing a watch part blank and it's all plastic on the outside, we're probably just going to polish it out. What about clay?
CA finish.
I agree.
What about all wood?
What about all wood?
I know what I use.
I would do a CA finish too, but you use lacquer. But it's a finish, it's a built-up
All
finish.
padding lacquer, yeah.
So what about using friction polish?
Quick, it's not.
It's got
Quick.
hardware in it too. It's got
Quick.
What about your, what you just said?
Clay,
No,
friction polish,
yes, over,
CA,
yeah.
No.
sure.
Why?
So why?
Yeah, but why? You haven't
Why?
even done-
Why would be the
No,
question?
Just talk about it, just,
Yeah, why would be my question. So most friction polishes have a little bit of, at least a little bit of shellac in them. So that's one of the reasons it polishes so, it helps polish out everything so easily, is because it actually acts as a wood hardener. So you're actually filling pores and you're hardening the wood, and it helps you polish it out. The biggest thing I see is if you're wanting a finish that, some people like a matte finish. Some people like natural feeling wood. And there's nothing wrong with that. If that's what they're wanting, then a friction polish would be great, I think. Because after a week or 2 or 3 of use, I think you're gonna wind up with a matte finish on that friction polish blank. So I guess there's nothing wrong with that if it's what you're after. I've had people say they don't like the glass look. They want it natural. So for me at home, again, I would just put this on the Beal system, but here's the Beal system for tonight.
So when you say that, what are you using on the Beal system?
So I would use the cotton wheel. So it's the one for carnuba wax.
Just carnuba?
Yep. And I typically don't load it with carnuba when I'm doing pins, unless the burl, if the burl doesn't have a CA finish on it, then I'm trying to polish the burl out. So like on a dragon egg or a bottle stopper where I didn't do a CA finish on it, then I would use carnuba wax to polish the burl up.
How are you holding that pen blank in the Beal system? It has a tendency to fly off on me.
Absolutely.
How are you holding on?
So the Beal system, until you get used to it, is the biggest piece grabber there is, and it'll throw it against the wall and break it. So is what I found for pin blanks is that I use a screwdriver. I use a Phillips screwdriver, and I hold the handle in one hand, and I've got the tube on the shaft, and with my other hand I'm holding the other end of the screwdriver, the tool end of it, and I've got my thumb pushed up against the blank, the back of it, and I'm slowing it down so it doesn't spin so fast, so that it's only maybe turning at 50 RPM and not burning my finger. And I let the wheel spin the blank. So, and if you do that, you have a lot more control of holding it because you've got both hands on the blank then. And it's harder for it to grab it.
Have you thought about taking your buffing wheel and as you're doing it right there, just buff it with your wheel and hand?
Some people do. I've heard.
I just thought of it.
I've heard of them doing it. I don't think there's a problem with that as long as your buffing wheel was good and clean. If there was a piece of grit or something in it, I would worry about a piece of sawdust or something being in it and maybe trapped. I don't know. I've heard of people doing that. I've even heard of people that make their own Beal system with a paint roller. A paint roller.
You can get single buffing wheels at Harbor Freight for like $4 or $5.
You can, absolutely.
I mean, if you're on your leg, why don't you just, I don't know, seems kind of natural to do it, you know?
And I've got one of those buffing ones, I haven't used it yet, but that's actually a really good idea. Because I was trying to figure out.
So I didn't do a super good job if you got your light.
Rig it up.
I can see some very fine line scratches because I was talking and didn't,
The lane.
not really paying attention. There's a couple right there.
Lane and
Product.
But that's not bad.
Harry, you get everything squared away on all those?
Yes,
Good.
Clarence is on his way, so I'll get rid of his even.
Do we have any time left?
20 minutes.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
Yep, 20 minutes.
So that's kind of the whole process. If you look over this blank, you can probably see a couple real fine hairline scratches in the black. You can also see that there is some black in this that I'm guessing
Here you go, Robert.
could very well be black spray paint.
Now it's tarnished.
Now it's dirty. That's got grit on it.
You know what other works? And this is just because I have kids and we go through the lens protector for phones.
Yeah,
You get them at the dollar store for $1.
sure.
They usually give you about a 2-inch by 3-inch pad to clean it. I throw them away. I'm not gonna be throwing them away anymore.
Yep.
I mean, that's,
We buy these linen cleaning wipes on Amazon. You get a package of, I got one, thank you. We're good. I get a package of 100 of them, I forget how much it was. They're really nice ones though, for our glasses at home. And so I'll use them, you know, for a week or two. And then that becomes my new polishing pad for.
so you guys are talking about applicators on what you use for CA. That little bag that you're putting down right now
Yep,
slides over your finger very easily and very
Yep.
nice. And that's what I use.
yep. And a lot of people,
Just like you said before.
I used them too for a long time. Nothing wrong with that at all. They do work. See if I can remember how to do this.
No, in the tip.
This end. This end.
Spring goes in the tip, yeah, and then that screws onto the,
Duh.
it's all good.
You know, I'm terrible for reading instructions too. I hardly ever do, so. Until I put it together wrong. And then out they come. Why did I do that? Or I can't figure it out, I'm missing a piece. And they
You
come to
get
find
one
out.
of those kits that have a dozen pieces and you go, this band and this band and this band, and then you got a decorative band and you got, holy
Right.
crap.
Oh, there we go. So if I wasn't talking quite so much and paying more attention to sanding, I could have got rid of a couple little fine line scratches that are there, but it's pretty nice though. Not bad. So we talked about finishes with, different finishes with wood and hybrids and different kind of blanks that we can buy. I mean, there's all kinds of blanks out there. There's label casts, there's the ribbon blanks. My God, it's just endless anymore. We didn't talk too much about just plain wood blanks. So, you know, all of us start with just wood blanks, and there's nothing wrong with, you know, you find something that's got some nice figure over here and you want to go home and make a pin out of it. There's nothing wrong with that at all. The biggest thing that I see, I've always had the luxury, since I became a pin turner, of turning stabilized material. And that's because I was stabilizing wood before I became a pin turner. So for me, it's second nature for me to grab something that's stabilized or for me to stabilize it prior. A lot of you don't have that luxury, I know, and a lot of you turn material that you find local, I mean tree branches, even, whatever. And the thing that I see with that, the biggest thing that I see and hear from in our industry about it is, for one, making sure that your material that you're turning has already reached EDC, which is basically our moisture content of our air here. It's already acclimated to our climate, and it's dry to that. So it has no moisture in it from its process. If you do that in this state, that means you're down to maybe 14–15%.
Sometimes 12. if you
Yeah,
like.
maybe 12 if you've got it in a hot garage, okay? And so 12% moisture. Okay, so you make a nice pin, it's got 12% moisture in it, and you do a CA finish over it. awesome. It's great. Everything's good. You live with it like that. You use that pin daily. You hop on a plane and you go to the driest climate you can think of.
Arizona.
I'd say the desert somewhere,
I'd say
but whatever.
Texas.
You go to wherever. Some dry climate, and you're there for weeks and it's in just dry air. So the moisture that's in there, what happens to it?
Wants to escape.
It goes away. It tries to. So it goes away, and then the question becomes, okay, does it crack? Maybe not. It shrinks a little bit though. The wood shrinks because it lost the moisture. So maybe it caused a crack in your CA. I don't know, maybe. Maybe nothing happened. And then you go from there and you go to Florida. And it's humid and hot and it's the middle of summer and now it sucks up all that moisture. What happens then? I don't know.
That's why I don't, on natural wood blanks, so I don't put that kind of a finish on it.
See, that is the question, and it's a valid question.
What if you sell a pin?
And you ship it to
sell
those
your
countries.
neighbor,
No,
lives
you
in
ship it to
Colorado,
them, right.
It goes to a graduation in Florida.
That's the
He goes to
question.
school, graduates in Florida, goes to school in Arizona, Nevada.
But is lacquer gonna flex?
No, it doesn't. It moves with it.
It flexes.
Just like furniture.
It flexes it.
Just like
Okay.
furniture. It's a
It flexes.
furniture wax.
See, and that's why I like the Mercury CA, because it flexes, and people claim that you can take it from an environment like that and be fine.
So like polyurethane then would be the same.
Poly would probably be the same, and there's a couple guys that do, Les Elm does a poly dip system, and he dips his pins, so he turns them, and then I don't know the whole method, but he dips them, and then he lets them, does he rotate them, or does he let them hang?
Just lets them hang.
Lets them hang and lets them drip dry, and then he does, I think, another coat or two. I think he builds up coats, but it's a poly dip system. And it works great. I mean, their pins look fantastic.
So what does he do with the inside the tubes?
I don't know, he plugs them somehow when he's
So
dipping.
he's using a plug.
I think he's using a dowel or something, I don't know. But there's systems out there. The point was though, if you're gonna turn a wood pin, you know, think about where you're taking it or where you're sending it. If you're gonna sell it to people in different climates, you might wanna think about having it stabilized. Stabilizing does a few things. So one thing that it's really big on is that once you stabilize it, it doesn't take on moisture and it doesn't lose moisture. It just doesn't move. It stops the wood movement. And that's the big concern, is wood movement from the moisture intake or the moisture relief.
Well, and it also has to do with like your species of wood, because like an ebony or a rosewood or something
Absolutely.
like that, that's gonna move.
Different than a
Sure.
walnut cherry.
Sure, or you get a piece of wingate. I
Yeah.
mean, that stuff is nothing but, you look at it wrong and it cracks. So, you know, those kind of things. But some wood doesn't stabilize well either. So there's also those factors, but
Like oily woods, right?
oily woods don't, and neither does the dense woods like brown mallee and red mallee or coolaba or some of the Australian timbers. I still stabilize them. I still stabilize them, and I do extra long soaks with them, and I can get them to upcake some. But, you know, one of our blanks, for example, this blank, spalted maple. So this blank, if it gained double its weight, which is pretty common for it to gain double or triple its weight from the stabilizing process, that same blank in one of them oily burls or one of the dense materials may gain not even a tenth of its weight. So it's just so minuscule. But whatever you get out of it is better than none.
So have you found anything that with like a really oily species like ebony or something like that you can do to help it stabilize?
Yes.
Lignum violet.
A little bit. So a couple things you can do. One is you can soak it in rubbing in alcohol to help release the oils in it,
Okay.
to get them out of there first. The problem with that is then you have to really let it air dry before you put it in your oven and fast cure. Yeah. So you've got to, I mean, it's got to sit for months. You've got to let it sit for months to literally dissipate all the moisture or the alcohol in it. So that helps. The other thing is a prolonged soak, what's called a prolonged soak. So normally we vacuum till there's no bubbles and then we double soak. We double that time and soak, minimum. I can tell you all of our blanks go triple that time, minimum. And most of them will go a whole week. For me, usually, if I've dried my blanks properly and they're all pin blanks in a run, about 6 to 8 hours in my chamber, and they're out of it and they're in the next phase, which is the soak, which would mean that it's a double that time, 16-hour, 20-hour cycle, and I'm leaving it in there for 3 or 4 or 5 days. So normally I do my stabilizing on Friday. I start the chamber running. Saturday, it's in the soak, and it sits there till the whole next weekend. The longer the soak, the more uptake you'll get from the oily and the denser materials, and from stuff that's soft like pine, that has a lot of sap in it, redwood. Some of those don't take well either.
So you're taking it out of your vacuum chamber and putting it into another container with just resin?
No.
No.
Cactus
Leave it
juice.
another
You
day.
can, but if you're going to do that, you need to let it set for at least, a half a day or so. 90% of the uptake of the cactus juice into the blank happens in the first 3 or 4 hours. So if you're gonna put it in a separate container, then wait at least 3 or 4 hours and then dump it and cover it right
You're
away.
just taking vacuum off, or just not running the vacuum?
You're killing you're no vacuum at all. So that negative pressure causes the cactus juice to impregnate the blank, to completely fill it. So,
And then you pull it out and bake it.
and then after that, for me, it's almost a week. Then it comes out and it gets baked at 180 degrees, usually for 3 or 4 hours till it's cured, but depending on the size of the blank.
So I thought your resin was a higher cure, like 220 or?
No, drying the blank is 220. So to dry the wood prior to stabilizing, we have to reach 220 degrees to actually boil the moisture out of the blank. And we're talking about just the moisture that's in the air.
Not at this altitude, though. You only need to get it
True.
over 205.
So we're at 212 or 2 something for boiling. So we could essentially be less,
But 220 is.
but 220 works. Yeah, you want to be over boiling. You got to be over the boiling point, but you don't want it to reach. I personally don't want it to get above 250. I found that if it gets above 250, then the material actually will start breaking down, and you'll actually see it. It'll actually turn it toasty. So it's like it's toasted, like it's a toasted brown on the outside, and the material has actually started breaking down. When you stabilize it and when you turn it, you can tell a difference.
It's almost charring it.
It is. It breaks the fibers up. It actually starts breaking and deteriorating it.
I have
So,
to find some wood that I have to stabilize. At one point in time, I got smoked oak. It's not barrel, but it's smoked oak, where they actually put the oak in a smoker, and that's what it did, and it's very, very.
the neat thing about that though, is that if you play with that too, with our bigger blanks, it chars the outside just a little bit, toasts the outside, right? And if you cast it and you start turning it, and you turn like an egg shape or something out of it, as you get into the center more, you get all this cool coloring in it.
Well, this is
It brings it out.
This is penstock
Yeah.
that I got.
So you get more of a varied look, and it's a neat look, it really is, but I wouldn't want to do it on pin blanks. It breaks the fibers down too much and you don't get a good job.
I assume you're selling these blanks and stuff?
We do sell them, and in fact, Woodcraft here carries them at the counter.
Oh, okay.
Turner's Warehouse, online, turnerswarehouse.com carries our blanks.
Can you buy them directly from you?
You can buy them directly from me as well.
Is there a website or?
There is not. I don't have time to maintain a website, but I can give you my Facebook page or my phone number, either way. And if you call me, I can always send you pictures of what's available. For example, right now I have about 200 blanks sitting at my house, pin blanks ready to go out the door. Although about 80 of them are headed to Turner's Warehouse in a week. But so if you got a color scheme in mind that you're wanting, it helps me to kind of break it out, because otherwise you get one mass picture of 20 blank or 100 blanks laying out, and then you can't hardly see anything. But yeah, we do. And there's other people online. The pin turning pages. There's all kinds of pin turning pages. It's not just me. Pin Turners is a Facebook page. If you're on Facebook, there's all kinds of turning sites that are just fantastic for information. Pin turning, Burroughs Blanks and More. If you're just wanting wood turning stuff, Wood Turning Connection, Wood Chuckers. It's never ending. I belong to probably 30 of them. And it's one thing that's really neat is that people post pictures of their work constantly and share their work. And a lot of it is just, I just go there for inspiration. I mean, some of these turners are world renowned. I mean, it's just amazing the work they're putting out. So it's neat to see what others are doing in other countries and ours. But
Cool.
cool.